Ever since Metroid Prime 4 was announced 6 years ago, I've made dozens of videos talking about what I want to see from the game. But now it's time to get serious, and go over 6 things Metroid Prime 4 needs to avoid doing. Starting with... Please don't let Metroid Prime 4 end with a fetch quest. The first Prime game was a big-time offender, requiring players collect 12 Chozo artifacts placed throughout the world in order to access the final area. While some are collected as players naturally go through the story, it's common to miss most of them, meaning once you collect the final item, the Phazon suit, you are sent to backtrack most of the world in order to find the final 6 or 7. You'd think Retro Studios would learn not to add an endgame fetch quest after this, but you'd be wrong. Metroid Prime 2 includes Sky Temple keys, which can't even be collected until getting the light suit at the end, although the pressure was somewhat alleviated with the fast travel system. Metroid Prime 3 is the least offensive of the trilogy, as the energy cells needed to get to the final planet are placed pretty easily throughout the game, and you don't have to collect all of them. Still, I'd prefer to leave these unfun collectathon missions in the past where they belong. Now let's talk about talking, a favorite subject amongst Metroid nerds like me, as I believe Metroid Prime 4 should avoid relying on spoken dialogue. Don't get me wrong, I like voice acting in games, when it's done well, but as recent Metroid games have shown, relying on spoken dialogue too much could lead to some divisive results. Metroid Prime 3 kicked off the idea with multiple voiced characters, like the bounty hunters that all sound pretty cool.
Relax, we're the good guys. Justice will prevail and all that stuff. Right, Samus?
As a result, though, the game did not feel as isolating as the first 2 Prime games, acting like a sci-fi military shooter in some parts. Then we get to Other M, which probably had 400 times as much talking as Prime 3, completely obliterating the isolating atmosphere Metroid is known for, with over 2 hours of cutscenes telling a less than stellar story.
The babies cry, babies cry.
Metroid Dread, on the other hand, struck a perfect balance, with the majority of dialogue coming from Adam's computerized voice that would guide Samus back to her ship.
The ship's location is marked on your global map. Check it for yourself.
There were also cutscenes with characters like Quiet Robe speaking the Chozo language, not to mention Samus's one line that made every Metroid fan lose their minds. While Metroid Dread had spoken dialogue, it did not over-rely on it in the same way Metroid Prime 3 and Other M did, still retaining most of the signature lonely Metroid atmosphere. If Metroid Prime 4 needs to have spoken dialogue to tell its story, perhaps it should take notes from Dread on how to do it. Metroid Prime 4 should be set on one planet, unlike Metroid Prime 3, because you can still have diverse biomes on a single world. As other Metroid games have proven time and time again, not only do I find it more rewarding unlocking pathways in a single location, but it also helps avoid an archaic travel system, such as how you had to slowly travel planet to planet in Metroid Prime 3. And to be fair, even the Metroid games set on one planet have fumbled when it came to traversing between areas, like the first Prime, which had some tedious backtracking thanks to multiple elevators that weren't ideally located, annoyingly placed items, and yeah, that endgame fetch quest. To be fair, later Primes improved upon this with some limited fast travel, but Metroid Prime 4 can do even better. In fact, Metroid Dread and Samus Returns might showcase the best path forward, as they provided a great way for quick travel via the teleport stations, allowing you to quickly get around without completely eliminating the need to explore on foot, as there aren't a ton of them. And I'm confident Metroid Prime 4 will have a feature like this to save us from annoying downtime. Heck, even if there's going to be multiple planets in this game, who's to say you couldn't warp between them with teleport stations? Remember the portals between dimensions in Metroid Prime 2? Speaking of that, look, I love Metroid Prime 2, but while I understand some arguments that it might be better than the first game, I can't agree with them for one main reason: Dark Aether. You know what I'm talking about, that poisonous atmosphere that quickly drains Samus's health whenever you dare explore outside a small bubble? It's absolutely punishing, and I don't want anything like this in Metroid Prime 4. I don't know about you, but I don't want this restrictive red light green light mechanic in my Metroid games where exploration is a key element. It especially sucks during a boss fight where not only the enemy is dealing damage, but the literal air is as well. Booth Guardian. However, Metroid Dread did something like this, only with looming threats instead of poisonous atmospheres, and it was handled way better than Dark Aether in Metroid Prime 2, as they didn't take up literally half the game or feel overly punishing thanks to those areas eventually becoming safe zones as a reward. So there may be a correct way to implement some punishing environments in Metroid Prime 4, just don't take any notes from Prime 2 at all. I keep bringing up Metroid Dread for a good reason, as it did a lot of things right. Except for one, the soundtrack. I am begging Metroid Prime 4 to avoid having music as mediocre as Dread's. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but when you compare it to the iconic tracks of yesteryear's Metroid games, it doesn't even come close. I mean, the Torvis Bog theme has affected how I grade music for the rest of my life. Dark Side of the Moon, 0 out of 10, not Torvis Bog theme. The musical score throughout the Metroid Prime trilogy is consistently great, bringing in grandiose orchestral sounds with a mixture of techno-space wizardry that can only be created by composer Kenji Yamamoto. Wait, not that guy. Yeah, that guy. He served as a composer on all 3 games, as well as a few other titles like Super Metroid, occasionally collaborating with other composers. The last 2 Metroid games, however, saw him serve as the music director, with other artists on the composer chairs. And after hearing what was done with those games' soundtracks, I'm hoping Retro Studios gives Yamamoto the composer badge again so he can create more certified bangers. Finally, Metroid Prime 4 shouldn't skip the Nintendo Switch, as in the one we all have now and not the rumored Switch 2. While it hasn't been confirmed by Nintendo, it's been heavily theorized, and for good reason, that the game could become a cross-gen release at this point, launching on both the standard Nintendo Switch and the next console, similar to how Breath of the Wild released on both Wii U and Switch, which would be fine. But some have also theorized that it could be a Switch 2 exclusive title, and I'm going to give you a few good reasons as to why this is a horrible idea. For starters, the game was initially announced to be in development for the Switch 6 years ago. To just completely forego that promise is a bad move that creates distrust among your fans. 2. Look at the install base of the Switch. Is it really a good idea to abandon those 130 million users for a system that's probably not going to have nearly that many in the first few years? I'm not saying every Switch owner will buy Metroid Prime 4, but you don't want to ignore that install base. And I know Samus Returns came out on the successful Nintendo 3DS and still didn't sell that many units, but that was a unique situation where the game came out only on a system that was on its last legs thanks to the growing popularity of the Switch. And had it dual released on both 3DS and Switch, it may have been a different story. I also theorize that the Switch will not immediately be made obsolete by the next console, since the game lineup shows no signs of slowing down in what might be its final year as a solo platform, unlike the last years of previous Nintendo systems like the Wii and Wii U. Tons of people are still going to be playing their Switches for years after the new console releases, so why not give them another game to play like Metroid Prime 4? And I can already hear some of you typing this in the comments.
Listen, Joey, if Metroid Prime 54 released on both Switch and Switch 2, it would hold the Switch 2 version back from looking the beast it can be. Trust me, I am much smarter than you. It's the last thing I told my wife before she left me. Love, Jake.
Thanks, Jake, and as much as I can understand your point, I'm sorry, I just don't buy that. If Metroid Prime Remastered is of any indication, Prime 4 is still going to look and run amazingly on whatever you play it on, be it the current Switch or Switch 2, especially when it's been designed from the ground up for the hardware. Also, it would be a little rude to release Metroid Prime Remastered on Switch, and presumably 2 and 3 shortly down the line, if you're not going to release Prime 4 on it. Yeah, Metroid Prime 4 should not skip the Nintendo Switch, because I also want there to be a Metroid Prime 5, and what better way to ensure that game's existence than by releasing 4 on both Switch and Switch 2. Get those current Switch owners invested in the Prime series, and then they'll be interested enough to get a Switch 2 if Metroid Prime 5 gets announced for it. Oh yeah, I'm thinking about the long game here. And those were 6 things that I don't want to see happen to Metroid Prime 4. Hopefully we'll finally see what this game looks like sooner than later. So let me know in the comments what you don't want to see in the game, and until next time, bye bye.